If you want to understand contemporary UAP disclosure narratives, you need to go back to the past and understand the myth of repressed memory. The myth of repressed memory was central to alien abduction claims made in the 90s. And as you'll see, it is central to claims associated with Scientology and magic that has intersected with the space exploration programs, let's say, since at least 1946, when Jack Parsons of the JPL performed the Babalon Working with Aleister Crowley and L. Ron Hubbard. Now, we're going to make the connections between that one event in 1946 and contemporary UAP disclosures, and we're going to make a few jumps from that working in 1946 to Hal Puthoff, a Scientologist who established Project Stargate, and then up until 1990s with the alien abduction research, and then finally to the contemporary UAP Disclosure Act of 2023 and the sort of disclosure narrative being put forward by the government or government scientists associated with Chris Bledsoe. This presentation focuses on the myth of repressed memory and the notion that hypnosis or holotropic breathing can recover memories of alien or face-to-face ET encounters. Now, this is a controversial subject, and I have talked about this at length in other presentations and supported my arguments through several books, including Missing Time Found and Galathog the Gray's Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry. So if you need to get up to speed, check those books out. Reduction to absurdity is a sort of style of argumentation where it says, okay, if this is true, then that is true. If that is true, then this next thing is true. And then you keep going. And if what you get at the end of that chain of reasoning is absurd, then the argument is absurd. So you've reduced it to absurdity. I am going to reduce Danny Sheehan's claim that John Mack did not perform hypnosis to absurdity through this chain of literary, let's say, connections. This presentation is going to be different from the presentations I've given before because it's really just presenting an inquiry I'm on. So we are going to engage in the primary sources together, which are generally interviews from YouTube or other presentations, some Wikipedia articles and things like that. So I'm chaining together a narrative, and I'm offering this as documentation of that narrative. That narrative is being crafted as an argument to absurdity against Danny Sheehan's claims that face-to-face ET contact is legally could be proved legally beyond reasonable doubt based upon anything like memory recovery, anything that looks like hypnosis, modified hypnosis, light relaxation exercises, or holotropic breathing. Right. So just stay with me to the end. Thanks for being here. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. You can email me at daniel@dseti.org. So let's get into it. Why am I talking about this? So this is a news article from last year. Schumer, a very powerful man in legislature, Schumer rounds introduced new legislation to declassify government records related to unidentified aerial phenomena and UFOs, modeled after the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act as an amendment to the NDAA. So this proposal was more or less crippled in that there's no longer subpoena power. David Grush said this was a terrible failure of democracy, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get into it. Here is the act, and you can see if we search for flying saucers and discs, and then we can look for biologics. yet biological evidence of non-human intelligence. So this really was put forward before Congress and the Senate to bring forward government records about flying saucers and alien bodies. I made this presentation, Memory Myths, in direct response to some of Danny Sheehan's claims about how holotropic breathing can retrieve memories. This presentation is a supplement to that. And I just wanted to show here, right? And basically, let's just skip to it because here we have John Mack writing in Passport to the Cosmos. The use of a non-ordinary state of consciousness, however, relaxation exercise or modified hypnosis, can penetrate more deeply into the mysteries of the experience and help therapeutically release the powerful emotions held within that seem almost always to be left in the wake of experiences. The method of investigation will be described in the next chapter. We've got the next chapter here, modified hypnosis relaxation exercise. And it gives the notion that emotions are standing in the way, emotions and anxiety are standing in the way of remembering an event. So that's key to the myth of repressed memory. Here is, we'll play the claims right now because I keep coming back to this. I go, did Danny Sheehan actually say John Mack never performed hypnosis? How could he have lied so flagrantly about this? So we'll listen to it to hear what he has to say.
That he began actually conducting like an investigation. What he would do is he never hypnotized. John never hypnotized anybody. He didn't want to do that.
He never did?
No, he did not. What he does is he did a thing called holotropic breathing. Holotropic breathing was a method that was developed by Stanislav Grof to actually get people super relaxed. And they would do it's sort of like Hindu breathing through the different nose things, and they would get into a kind of an elevated state of consciousness and get very, very relaxed. And that was the key for them to remember things, that any kind of anxiety that they had that was blocking any of their memory. So he would do the holotropic.
So anxiety is blocking memory, and you can do holotropic breathing, which is not hypnosis, to get in a super elevated state of consciousness, super relaxed, and so that the anxiety that's blocking is released, and therefore the truth can come up free and clear, right? That's the mythology put forward here. And in here, the video I talked about, I quoted from the holotropic.com, the training organization, about how it can know about transpersonal realms and past lives and future lives and all sorts of things, which are meaningful modes of inquiry, but not necessarily legal evidence or anything like that. I also quoted from ethics guidelines that you should check out. I also looked at the number of scientific papers written about holotropic breathing and memory recovery versus hypnosis, and conclude there's no evidence holotropic breathing can recover memory. There's evidence John Mack literally and truly wrote and did hypnosis. And so I wanted to point a little bit more to that. You know, this is coming from an article of a Skeptical Inquirer. There was a really damning event with John Mack where Donna Bassett posed as an abductee, went into sessions with John Mack, and recalled a fake event through hypnosis. And a lot of this was filmed by PBS, and they say they filmed hypnosis. So these articles say he did hypnosis. The skeptics say he does hypnosis. He's arguing he's doing a modified hypnosis. So John Mack truly did practice hypnosis. Here's actually a picture of Bud Hopkins, who literally did hypnosis with his subjects, and he presents that in the book Missing Time, to which my book Missing Time directly responds. He's having a hypnosis session with Bud Hopkins, who looks to be holding the hand of a woman who is lying relaxed on the bed, and John Mack's sitting there. And John Mack dedicated his book Abduction to Bud Hopkins. Therefore, I must conclude that this perhaps is evidence of John Mack doing hypnosis and not breath work. So, why is this relevant? Well, here's the New Paradigm Institute Danny Sheehan is talking about. And he's using this lie that John Mack never performed hypnosis to elevate claims of face-to-face ET contact from allegedly witnesses he could bring forward to legislature, obviously Schumer with the UAP Disclosure Act. So one of the claims Sheehan makes is that the New Paradigm Institute would have served as a citizen advisory council or board to the president about what should or should not be disclosed, in the same way that the JFK files had a citizen advisory board. So I assume he's buddy-buddy with Schumer or the guys there that are writing this legislation. So I think that's very, very relevant, right? These claims of face-to-face ET contact are very compelling, and he's a very compelling speaker. But there's actually evidence to the contrary that those witnesses are credible or would prove beyond a reasonable doubt in any jurisdiction of the law. So what's going on here? Well, New Paradigm Institute invites you to take action. You can demand hearings. You can strengthen the NDAA provision. That's the UAP Disclosure Act. There's resources where he shares his podcasts and stuff like that. Citizens for Disclosure. There's also classes where you can take classes with Sheehan and Richard Dolan, and that is allegedly accredited by Ubiquity University as part of the first ET Studies program. That accreditation is from the Ubiquity University's own accreditation board, and they warn that likely will not be accepted by other academic bureaucracies. Here is an example of a press kit he's giving out. There's Danny Sheehan, the president of New Paradigm Institute. And this would have been the institute that will, I guess, is providing would have provided recommendations for disclosure to the president. Right. So, anyways, we're going to keep going on this inquiry. So we need to dial it back to what's going on, actually. So if these claims are, or this, all this stuff is coming up, perhaps because of the myth of repressed memory, what's going on. So to contextualize it, we need to talk about this book. Myth of Repressed Memory was put out by Loftus and Ketchum. Loftus was a memory researcher, right? So they looked at the sex abuse scandals, the memory war scandals of the early 90s, where therapists would talk to people and say, hey, you have anxiety. It looks like you have symptoms of sex abuse. You don't remember it, but that's actually a symptom of sex abuse. And therefore, if you use these extraordinary therapy techniques like finger painting or breath work or hypnosis, you too can recover memory. And that then after this process of therapeutic elucidation of these fantastic memories of sex abuse, there would sometimes be legal accusations, criminal accusations of the abusers. And her work was all about figuring out, can hypnosis implant false memories? Yes, they can. Is hypnotically retrieved memories unreliable? Yes, they are unreliable. And so it talks about that sort of dialogue that was happening. To give context, then, next up is a paper from 1996 by researchers who have been talking about hypnosis and things like that for decades now. And they talk about a process by which someone may recover memories in combination with a therapist. And their argument is simple. A person has an unexplainable phenomena happen, like a dream phenomena or a visitation. I say that actually does happen. A UFO sighting actually does happen sometimes, right? They seek out a therapist. The therapist says, hey, this might actually be an abduction. What do you think? The person, they don't explore alternatives, then they talk about the abduction explanation. The anxiety around the event is reduced because you finally know what's going on. The therapist legitimizes that through positive reinforcement, and the client then adopts this victim role. And so that dynamic seems to happen across a number of different phenomena, which have been explored in this paper by Joseph Laycock in 2012 called Carnal Knowledge. And it basically says, hey, sex abuse trauma and fantastic narratives have been used in as proof for witchcraft, satanic ritual abuse, and alien abduction. They follow the same pattern, and that pattern involves an interlocutor, meaning a researcher, a priest, someone else who's looking into an experience, finding evidence, and making conclusions about supernatural realities. He says that sexual trauma narratives have a particularly strong and unconscious authority, and that's why they're used as proof, right? That somehow people hear them and they go, oh, okay, that makes sense, as opposed to engage a critical, conscious, rational approach to it. So this explains in part what's going on and why there are fantastic sexual elements to a number of the testimonies that were brought forward by John Mack, Bud Hopkins, and David Jacobs. So to continue on with the orientation around the myth of repressed memory, we can turn to this paper, What Science Tells Us About False and Repressed Memories. This was published in 2022. And it basically gives an outline of what went on and says, yes, actually, the myth of repressed memory is a myth. That there's really no evidence that therapy as such, extraordinary therapy or hypnosis, can recover these things. Then finally, here's an interesting paper which was published recently by the similar authors in 2021 is this myth still prevalent? And indeed, they find that around 58% of people, 58% of clinical of people believe in the myth of repressed memory. And I believe that is just astounding today, okay, so that was the myth of repressed memory. That was why it's relevant to the UAP Disclosure Act. That's how it connects to Sheehan and his claims about John Mack. I want to bring in this tact, which involves Chris Bledsoe and notions of Scientology. And this is going to put pieces out on the paper and then connect the dots. So this might feel a little this, that, and the other thing like popcorn, but just know that there's a theme coming up. I've really been appreciating this channel, Vetted. This is in part in direct inspiration to the format I'm presenting in. I really do appreciate a sort of live documentation of inquiry with these original materials that you can then work with yourselves to explore. So I'm going to play a little bit of this clip, which is what surprised me.
Chris Bledsoe Jr. right here, right? Okay. And Tim Taylor, let's see if I got this picture. So here's Chris Bledsoe Jr. This is Tim Taylor, and this is Chris Bledsoe, to show they do hang out together, right? He put him in his book, and basically Chris outed him because he was known as Tyler in both Diana Pasulka's book and Chris Bledsoe's book. And this is his son, right? This is right here. This right here is Chris Bledsoe Jr., Tim Taylor, right? Chris Bledsoe. Okay. So just to show, right, they do hang out. They are together, right? And this is, again, the picture from the thumbnail that I used, but I've used this picture before, right? This is showing Diana Pasulka, Tim Taylor, again, at the Vatican, okay, because they talked about having a meeting. There's some proof of it. Well, at least that they hung out with this guy. So anyway, there are so many claims from Tim Taylor that have been made. that the things that have happened, the stuff that Diana has said about him, right? We're going to watch a video about how she claimed to go to a secret UFO crash site that Tim Taylor, the same guy that they're talking about here, took her to there, and Gary Nolan, right? They got materials. It was a UFO crash site that he's been maintaining for decades, right? He also was part of Space Force, Tim Taylor. And he went up into, zero gravity and would work on things, supposedly metamaterials, and bring back biologics. Okay. He also supposedly, or at one time, was confirmed to be Elon Musk's SpaceX handler. Right? For the government, right? Like back and forth. He was the guy to handle Elon.
Okay, so he goes on to talk about this video, and we'll watch that video because it's pretty important. I appreciated his. Well, I'll show a little bit.
Or whatever this being is, killed itself on accident. The whole species in a calamity, just like a nuclear cataclysm, something of that nature. They were wiped out. And in his dream,
nuclear cataclysm, Bigfoots on Mars, they had nukes.
Their billions or whatever number of souls left the planet in shock and trauma through this cataclysmic event. And that the guardians who took my father, remember this is a dream, the guardians who took my father whisked the billions of souls of these Bigfoot creatures who were once advanced, fashioned them a primitive body to be sort of like a therapy for their soul so that they could be rehabilitated, brought them to Earth, placed them here, allowed them to use their interdimensional whatever abilities. Well, why we can never catch them. This is all in a dream. Just that's important to know. And that they are slowly but surely being rehabilitated from the trauma of instant cataclysm. So Dad wakes up. He's like, oh my God, that's a weird dream. He goes and tells Tyler D, and Tyler looks at him and he said, how did you know that? And Dad said, I had a dream. And he said, you are the most informed person I've ever met. And that was it.
I mean, what? I don't even know what to say to that. Is this Tim Taylor guy really saying these things to these people? Like, does he really believe all this stuff? I mean, I'm so confused. It's fascinating.
Okay, so I've been thinking about this guy's confusion since I saw this video. I'm like, what? He because it's such a beautiful inquiry of approaching this material and going like, what is going on? But it could be the case, right? And so I go, why? I know this is explained by the myth of repressed memory. I know it is. I know that by answering the question how Danny Sheehan's misunderstanding of John Mack's hypnosis, how that's relevant to UAP disclosure, that will solve Patrick's confusion about Ryan Bledsoe's father's dream that was interpreted by Timothy Taylor as like accurate knowledge or something. So here's the post. I checked it out. I mean, that was here, Chris Bledsoe. Ryan Bledsoe has a podcast called Bledsoe Said So. I mean, it's a video. I listened to it. It's fascinating.
Therapy for their soul so that they could be rehabilitated. Brought them to Earth, placed them here, allowed them to use their interdimensional whatever abilities. Well, why we can never catch them. This is all in a dream.
She's talking about Bigfoots, but it's such a relevant myth, this sort of cataclysm, entrapment on Earth, imprisoned in bodies, and then elevation or working through karma or that sort of thing. Let's see. The next thing I want to jump to actually is this. This is why I saw this just yesterday, this little bit, and I go, oh my God, this is the myth that Taylor was supporting in Bledsoe, in Ryan's retelling of Bledsoe's dream or whatever, that experience. So This is from, obviously, Scientologist exposes the insides of the secretive cult, and they play a clip from L. Ron Hubbard about some of the doctrine that is offered at the higher levels of Scientology. I'll just play that now.
Today we dive into this mysterious and controversial order.
75 million years ago, the galaxy was ruled by a tyrant named Zeno. One day, Zeno rounded up various wrongdoers and imprisoned them in volcanoes on Earth, which was then called Tegeok.
This is the world according to church founder L. Ron Hubbard.
Hydrogen bombs were dropped on them. Then their spirits, called Thetans, were trapped in humans. And that is the cause of all our sufferings. Only through Scientology can our Thetans be cleared.
Wow, I think we're going to...
So what is Scientology? I turn to Wikipedia to answer that. It's a set of beliefs and practices by L. Ron Hubbard. He was a science fiction author, and then it's been described as a cult, a scam, etc., surrounding the book Dianetics and this practice. And so key beliefs include reincarnation, and that traumatic events cause problematic engrams in the mind that can be removed only through activity called auditing. So this is like if you replace engrams with anxiety and auditing with hypnosis, you get the myth of repressed memory as put forward by Sheehan, as put forward by Mack, as put forward by the side for the recovered sex abuse memories in the memory war controversy. And this describes multiple levels of the system of Scientology. And if you're at the top level, you get the doctrine, right? The documentary here, or this little clip, interviewed a member of this Scientology who described that the lower levels were very much just about stress testing using the E-meter or auditing for reduction of suffering. And then the higher levels, you get the mythology of Thetans and so on and so forth. So that really did connect in with the Bigfoot myth. That was very, very strong. And I need to just call out some of the research I've done regarding the government scientists, right? So this one event for me is why I'm skeptical of Timothy Taylor's assessment of anything related to extraterrestrials or UFOs. This one event gives me an understanding that's of the focus of the government science done around Bledsoe. So in 2022, he went to the Monroe Institute to do a human-initiated contact event. They saw a flashing light in response to what Bledsoe claims at the end of his book, UFO of God, was a prayer to demonstrate the miraculous power of God over skeptics. One of those skeptics was my good friend and first client, Dan Berg. So I know this story well, and I've been paying attention to it. I thought for several months that this one flashing light could have been geometric communication from extraterrestrials in a spacecraft. Yet it clearly wasn't. I soon discovered that it was likely a geosynchronous satellite, and I sat with that knowledge for 9 months until claims were made by Bledsoe about government science. And I realized if they actually did government science, if they cared about flying spacecraft in the way that we have been led to believe, they have been looking into this. And I know that because I communicated with Bledsoe's handler, David Broadwell, about this very subject. And I've been ignored for about a year with promises that they've read my material or that it's valuable, but not actually looking into it. If they would have looked into it, or if their AI machines that they claim can accurately track space junk has missed this, or if their God-given rights of discernment have missed that this is actually just Intelsat 29E, I guess, or at least a tumbling satellite as determined by the government scientist, Dr. Michael Earle, a professor at the Royal Canadian Military College, who wrote he's an expert on space stuff. He says it's a tumbling satellite. I say it's a tumbling satellite. I say the government scientists are not looking up to the stars And I say that they have another agenda, and they are actually not government scientists when they work with Bledsoe, and that they are government adjacent scientists, religious practitioners. And that's totally fine, because that's sort of what I am too, but I'm not making claims of government science. So that's really important to bring in. I do believe that Bledsoe has an encounter phenomena with low-flying orbs. I believe those orbs are sentient. I believe they communicate with him. I believe it could be something as fantastic as extraterrestrials or non-human intelligences. But I do not like the way the claims are made regarding government science. I don't like the way the book was written. And I think it is as sophistic as Danny Sheehan's claims that John Mack does not perform or did not perform hypnosis. So I need to put some more pieces on the table, and then I'll start connecting the dots. So Project Stargate is one of the reasons why I pay attention to remote viewing and things like that. I know that Project Stargate remote viewed Mars, and this is one of the connecting points. So Project Stargate was a remote viewing program with a bunch of psychics, and included the work from SRI, right? So that's important to understand. We know that Hal Puthoff was involved. And so we know also that they looked to Mars around the plains of Cydonia, which have the face on Mars. It also had the mounds on Mars, which expresses a tetrahedral geometry. I would look to the work of Planetary SETI and Mark Carlotto to look into the amazing qualities of that area. But this document explores past history of Mars, and it comes from Project Stargate. And I have to read this as something like Puthoff's desire to understand the truth of perhaps the myths he was told in Scientology. Because one of the another piece of the puzzle is that we know Hal Puthoff is or was a Scientologist at least until the late 70s, in which he established the SRI International and did the work with Project Stargate. So we know that Hal Puthoff is associated with the UAP crash retrieval narratives in a variety of ways, primarily through his Institute for Advanced Science at Austin, and some of the work they do. Allegedly, he receives crashed UFOs. He compartmentalizes the technology and distributes those contracts to factions within the military-industrial complex. So that's how the UFO narratives are allegedly working with Hal Puthoff. I want to bring ground to that claim by turning to this video by Green Street that interviewed Eric Davis. Eric Davis is associated with current UAP disclosure through the Wilson memo, the Wilson-Davis memo. As best as I can tell, Davis was part of a research effort that was funded by DARPA that looked to 38 futuristic thinkers to describe future technology to help orient military-industrial projects. So it's also important to know that this is sort of associated with the Bigelow work and the $22 million of AATIP and OSAP. Green Street is getting to the bottom of, did Elizondo work for the Pentagon and UFOs or not? Was he actually paid or not? As best I can understand, there was a program called AATIP that through which Bigelow was funded $22 million thereabouts to study paranormal things at Skinwalker Ranch. That program, AATIP, AIMSOG was then nicknamed as AATIP. Elizondo worked for AIMSOG as a security thing, I guess, then adopted the nickname AATIP for his extracurricular interest in UFOs. He wasn't actually paid by anyone to work for UFOs, I guess, according to Green Street. And so it seems like there was a spin-off after-school club, let's say, called AATIP that looked into UFOs and things like that. Green Street implies that that group consisted of people who were responsible for observing the domestic skies and missed the fact that Chinese balloons were flying over our airspace because they were looking for UFOs and cryptids or whatever with Bigelow. And so he says that everyone's just kind of embarrassed about this situation and sort of not talking about it because they hope it won't show sort of lapse in judgment of the Pentagon or whatever. I'm saying that I have no idea. That's the speculation. Greenstreet's now interviewing Eric Davis regarding programs, and it's really, I'm just going to just show this clip because it will shed light.
Right. When they came out and said that Luis Elizondo had nothing to do with AATIP whatsoever, the Pentagon said this.
Was a horrible, wrong piece of public relations. That was absolutely incorrect. They did not know what they were talking about. My boss went to report to Lou at the Pentagon in the OUSDI offices during the AATIP era. So that's you know who my boss is, Hal Puthoff, right? Dr. Hal Puthoff.
Right. So your boss reported to Lou.
Yeah. And I've been over there too. I didn't report to Lou. I wasn't involved with Lou at that time, but I've been involved with the new management.
So are you guys still investigating UFOs at the Pentagon?
Yeah, I would say yeah, of course. They never went away. They never went away, Steve. They're still there. They're still coming up and causing aviation havoc because they're getting in the middle of military aviators operations, and that's dangerous. That's dangerous for those pilots.
I'm gonna ask one more time.
Sure.
Could you at least give me a clue, nugget, breadcrumb about the current AATIP? Anything.
That's about all I have for you, actually.
All right.
Okay, that's about it.
So I had it on a speed faster video, so I'm going to just play this thing about again, or just part of it.
Are you guys still investigating UFOs at the Pentagon?
Yeah, I would say yeah, of course. They never went away.
Right. So, and then there's another point I just want to go over.
My boss went to report to Lou at the Pentagon in the OUSDI offices during the AATIP era. So that's you know who my boss is, Hal Puthoff, right? Dr. Hal Puthoff.
Right. So your boss reported to Lou.
Yeah.
So I share this clip because it associates Eric Davis, Hal Puthoff, and known activity in the Pentagon. It also demonstrates the sort of government adjacent quality that I am identifying within the alleged government science that's going on associated with AATIP to the STARS or UAP Disclosure Act, New Paradigm Institute. It doesn't actually seem to stem from the government. It seems to stem from this sort of activity where you observe how Greenstreet asks, are you guys still studying the UFOs at the Pentagon? And Davis is like, yeah, I would say yeah. And it's actually, he's not under contract. He doesn't know anything about it anymore. He doesn't really have great information about it. He talks about being a futurist. And so I think what has happened is everyone's wowed by the fact that a physicist that's funded by the government is looking into UFOs and therefore understands that the government's doing this. But actually, he's not making the claim he's funded by the government to do UFO science. He doesn't know if they're doing it now. And he sort of name drops Hal Puthoff in a way that Greenstreet passes over, but seems to be important. I say it's important for a variety of reasons. So that's one side of it. There's many, many threads here weaving together. But the next thing I need to talk about is the connection of etheric magic, Enochian magic, with intelligence communities and space exploration. So to give you context, in the 16th century, let's just pull it up. Okay, so this guy, John Dee, this guy, John Dee, 16th century, he did a lot of stuff. He advised voyages of discovery to the New World. So here we have this sense of empire expansion. He used a sort of hypnosis kind of interlocutor style with his scryer Edward Kelly to transmit or receive a system of angelic communications that some people, including myself, may have been extraterrestrial in nature. He then produces a thing called what people now call is Enochian Magic. Enochian Magic. We're very close. This is an example of me performing Enochian magic using the language D received in the 1500s. This is relevant because Aleister Crowley and L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, of which Hal Puthoff was one of the highest members, who has a mythology about perhaps about Mars and about the entrapment of souls in bodies that need to be cleared through an interlocutor process, right? So this is all kind of tying up together. So it is actually associated, and the angels say it's associated. And so I perform Enochian magic as a way of inquiring about the mindset of the cohort around John Dee and the expansion of empire from Britain to the New World. And then I know it's associated with Jack Parsons, the JPL, the expansion of American rocketry, and L. Ron Hubbard, which is apparently associated once again with this sort of UAP disclosure kind of exploration, frontiers of science exploration. So I'm just going to play this to show you what it's like. Beginning is not, nor end cannot be, which shines as a flame in the midst of your palace and reigns among you as the balance of righteousness and truth. Move therefore and show yourselves. Open the mysteries of your creation. Be friendly to me, for I am a servant of your God, a true worshiper of the So I'm praying. I'm wearing robes. This is chanting. I did about 4 minutes of holotropic breathing before I started my scrying ritual. Sex and spirit. The angels are calling me to forgive. I forgive you. Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs for the alien abduction narrative. Right? Please just listen to my voice and repeat it, for this is a strange interpretation. This is the interpretation of a dream I had about Hal Puthoff that I did this scrying ritual for. Your understanding that the second figure is you is correct. Hal Puthoff, by a variety of strange circumstances, including those involved with his religion, Scientology, and so forth, has enjoyed a status within a community, enjoyed a role for the celestial community, a sort of ambassadorial role. It is obvious when you look at his activities with remote viewing. It goes on like that. You notice I make mistakes. It's not perfect. I share all this because of Marshall V. N. Summers and the Allies of Humanity, and how much fear he's managed to summon. And I go, you know what? He gave me courage to go I'm going to record everything and just put it up there whenever I cite my channeling rituals. You can see all the video and you can see how ridiculous it is. Except for this one, I'm keeping it private because you need some secrets. So they told me things, the angels did, about Hal Puthoff, and they told me things about disclosure, and they're inviting me to take this action. So I'm going to close that off. So that's the Babalon Working. Again, that's based in etheric magic. They say that actually the angels say, since I've done the ritual and I've produced a work on it, the Book of Galactic Light, I have a similar authority as Crowley and therefore subscene or go over the authority of L. Ron Hubbard. That's what they say, because they say the inspiration for the Scientology comes from this Babalon Working, and I, as priest of Asclepius, prophet of New Babylon, and mage, voice of the mage of the shattered mirror, which are my magical appellations in this working. They say I have greater authority to interpret the dreams of this nation, and therefore it's just important to note, is what they say. And so I'm keeping that secret, though, just out of trickster activity. So they don't know what I know, that sort of thing. But you notice I was forgiving everyone, and I did so out of love, because I think that's the only way forward. I need to find good in these sophists. That's what I call this man, Danny Sheehan. I call him a sophist because it seems as if he's doing good for the experiencer community. But I would argue that the alien abduction narrative put forward by John Mack and the crash retrieval narratives put forward in this decade are detrimental to the spiritual well-being of our people, and that if there weren't such distractions as these narratives, we would truly understand the natural and universal connection we have with the non-human world, and that we would clearly and distinctly understand that through engaging with things like hypnosis, things like dreamwork, that we can expand our scientific intuition, creativity, our technical well-being through ways that have been known to us through religion and psychology for millennia. That's simply dream incubation. That's simply relating to dreams as if they're meaningful. And that's what Socrates did. That's what Descartes did. That's what Einstein did. That's what Bohr did, Mendeleev, so on and so forth. They did not believe they were given formula by little grays who stole their bodies. So they were not terrorized about encountering those things. Although empire always has a sort of edge to it that says, oh, there's demons out there, you better be careful. Trust us, we'll protect you. So I want to play this clip again because we're getting to the end of this presentation. And this will just observe the rhetoric used, the body language, the laughing, the easeful communication that Sheehan responds to this question, and see how he delivers this bold-faced lie about how John Mack never performed hypnosis.
Conducting like an investigation. What he would do is he never hypnotized. John never hypnotized anybody. He didn't want to do that.
He never did?
No, he did not. What he does is he did a thing called holotropic breathing. Mm-hmm. Holotropic breathing was a method that was developed by Stanislav Grof to actually get people super relaxed, and they would do like, it's sort of like Hindu breathing through the different nose things, mm-hmm. and they would get into a kind of an elevated state of consciousness, and get very, very relaxed, and that was the key for them to remember things, that any kind of anxiety that they had that was blocking any of their memory. So he would do the holotropic breathing, and
so they'd get free and clear of anxieties that blocked true recollection of who you are. Now, this is very, very familiar because it is Scientology in another guise. Why do I say that? Well, let's actually hear from the man himself, L. Ron Hubbard, who conducted this interview in Zimbabwe. And he's asked the question, is auditing another form of hypnosis? Auditing is how you reduce stress, how you perform the essential practice of Scientology. And that's basically, as I understand it, and you should look it up, is you go in, you have these sessions that are expensive, and you're hooked up to a machine called the e-meter. An auditor who is indoctrinated and deemed free and clear by the Scientology organization questions you about engrams, which are perhaps complexes or anxieties that stand in the way of free and clear, true understanding of your essence as an immortal reincarnating soul, a Thetan. So and these are all recorded and archived somewhere in the Church of Scientology. just like I record my sessions and archive them at DSETI, so that whenever you want to know, so whenever you go, I lost the link to the recording, you can just email me and I'll give you a copy of the recording. And that's a service I offer as part of my shamanic dreamwork framed hypnosis practice, right? Anyway, so auditing is this interaction you had. Hal Puthoff likely went through auditing with Scientology. He likely audited other people. And that form of dyadic, sort of interlocutor style communication is familiar to those who have practiced remote viewing or know about it, in that the remote viewer goes into a trance and is questioned about their experience. That is familiar to the scrying work of John Dee and Edward Kelly, and that is familiar to John Mack's work with hypnosis. It is an essential form of interlocution, which David Laycock has identified as essential to this carnal knowledge thing, where we're using extraordinary sexual trauma narratives to basically prove or unconsciously prove the reality of supernatural things. So that's what's happening here. And I want to just play this interview. So that's auditing, L. Ron Hubbard, etc. Yeah.
Any ideology, and he becomes an honest man.
You said that through Scientology processing, a person was able to look at the problems, to confront the problems that they were facing in their everyday life. Is this some form of hypnotism?
Oh, no. That's very funny. Man is asleep. He is hypnotized. He is made to fixate on certain things, you see, and the process that you normally know as brainwashing and that sort of thing is hypnotizing man. It's forcing him into certain values. It's crowding him by various duress into these values. And he eventually becomes a person who has no awareness. Now, in Scientology, reverse the process, and you make him wake up. And he gradually gets more and more alert, and he's more and more wide awake, and his IQ rises higher and higher, and he is more and more capable of knowing what's going on about him. It's quite the reverse. So any ideology that wants to hypnotize man into believing, well, take communism, for instance, want to hypnotize man into believing he's this or that or the other thing and so forth. It comes a terrible cropper with Scientology, because such a man becomes unbrainwashed, you might say. He becomes unhypnotized. And that was the first thing, one of the first things I discovered about processing, and was actually the basic discovery of processing, that man was asleep, and he had to wake up. And then I went about trying to find out ways and means of how to make him do this, and that became processing.
Do you use drugs?
And he becomes an honest man.
You said that through Scientology processing, a person was able to look at the problems, to confront the problems that they were facing in their everyday life. Is this some form of hypnotism?
Oh, no. That's very funny. Man is asleep. He is hypnotized. He is made to...
Okay, so, and then we just actually need to go back to
conducting like an investigation. What he would do is he never hypnotized. John never hypnotized anybody. He didn't want to do that.
He
because,
never did?
No, he did not. What he does is he did a thing called holotropic breathing.
Mm-hmm.
Holotropic breathing was a method that was developed by Stanislav Grof to actually get people super relaxed, and they would do like, it's sort of like Hindu breathing through the different nose things, mm-hmm. and they would get into a kind of an elevated state of consciousness and get very, very relaxed, and that was the key for them to remember things, that any kind of anxiety that they had that was blocking any of their memory. So he would do the holotropic breathing and interview the people, and what he would do, what
Okay, so we don't need to keep going on with that. I just wanted to really just come back to the final question, right? Like, how does the myth of repressed memory inform contemporary UAP disclosure? You should know by now. You should have an intuitive feeling of this. So you should know, right? We went through what is the myth of repressed memory. We saw how it related to alien abduction. We saw how Danny Sheehan was applying it to the UAP Disclosure Act, how relevant that is. Then we kind of connected the dots with Chris Bledsoe's experience, Timothy Taylor, that perhaps maybe a Scientologist, I don't know. That would be a really great question for someone to figure out. I don't particularly want to go too much in depth more because I'm interested in other things, but we saw the connection of Scientology and Enochian Magic, Hal Puthoff, remote viewing. So there's a number of dots on the piece of paper that we've all kind of connected now. And that is a reduction to absurdity, right? So just looking between the, Danny Sheehan and
Commander,
him, Danny Sheehan, and this guy, right? Same argument, different century. Connected through an obvious chain of people. Hal Puthoff being a major node there. I don't need to prove any of this. I just need I'm just pointing light, and this is just an inquiry, right? The thing I proved in the literature references to John Mack's work, The Skeptical Inquirer, is that Danny Sheehan actually lied, it seems like, about John Mack's work. How could he have represented John Mack? How could he take the name New Paradigm Institute without having read Passport to the Cosmos? That's the question I have. So I must conclude he lied about John Mack for very specific reasons, and that's because he was likely unconsciously overwhelmed by the strange carnal authority Laycock described. Right? Same carnal authority. Where is that? It's right here. You want to know why that's possible? Read this. How it's possible for an entire Congress, or at least some part of it, an entire branch of really smart people that believe fantastic things, how that's possible. It's the answer's here. And I want to explore that more. It's really easy to be overwhelmed by the unconscious authority of these things. I've spent decades trying to figure out, am I an abductee or not? And I can say conclusively that I am an experiencer of the phenomena, and that the phenomenon is telling me to take these actions. And further, I can tell you exactly what the phenomena told me and how they told me it through the video recordings I've done of my Enochian workings. And I would pray that my Enochian workings, the Book of Galactic Light, and I'll just show you that now. I pray that this book, the Book of Galactic Light, informs another generation of intelligence community individuals who look to Enochian Magic as spiritual authority. And I hope that this spiritual authority subsumes the role of Hal Puthoff, actually. And I hope that, and I pray that primarily because I will advocate for ethics and epistemology of dreamwork, those that have already been established by the International Association of the Study of Dreamwork. I will advocate for the notion that memory, that hypnosis is not a reliable means of memory recovery. I will advocate against the myth of repressed memory. I will advocate for experiencers' rights and their own ethics and epistemologies as defined by the International Association of the Study of Dreams ethic guidelines for dreamwork. It involves the scholarly practice and your own dreamwork practice and being basically of service to others according to the principle of non-harm. So that's what I would see done in the narrative surrounding UAP disclosures in 2024. And that's what's going on now. This is all covered in the DSETI research proposal. I'm proposing to operationalize dream telepathy with extraterrestrial beings in line with, actually, and let's just pull it up. In line with this paper, SETI by Entanglement by, let's read it. Let's read it. By Michael Ibsen of the Institute for Advanced Studies at Austin, run by Hal Puthoff, right? And George Hathaway, a man who has been funded by the Prince of Liechtenstein to mediate his own scientific interests. The Prince of Liechtenstein funded, along with Bigelow, the 1990s abduction research that traumatized my childhood and traumatized my own, kind of produced the programming through television of my own nightmares, right? So these are the men, Bigelow and Prince of Liechtenstein, John Mack, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, Ron Westrom. Those are the men that are responsible for, a traumatic fear of the other worlds and dreams that I've had to wrestle with all of my life. And that wrestling has produced a conviction in mindfulness, of dream practice, and of forgiveness of self and others, and of service to self. It has crystallized in the Bodhisattva vow that I've taken within a cult-like organization, the Shambhala Buddhist organization, that also offered very expensive levels that kept going on and on and on, much like Scientology. So I've taken those vows, and I say they are valid. And the angels say they are valid too. And that's the spiritual authority by which I speak here and now and offer these criticisms of cult-like situations, because I know we can move through them for the benefit of all, and we can negotiate with the non-human intelligences for that technology, for that innovation, for that creativity. They'll give us intuition and creativity. They might not give us tech. And the metamaterials might be just like fairy gifts, like gold that turns to coal upon waking. All right. This is the paper written by Michael Ibsen, George Hathaway, with thoughtful suggestions from, where are they? Acknowledge. Kit Green and Hal Puthoff. And this is beautiful because it is the only peer-reviewed paper that uses geometry to authenticate dream telepathy with extraterrestrial civilizations. And if you want to see some of that geometry from dream telepathy with extraterrestrial civilizations, please do read my book, Field Guide to Anomalous Geometry. It's actually Galathog the Greys who is portrayed here. So with that, I've sort of connected all the dots. I've sort of gone on this rather strange and funny journey. I'm sort of baffled. I was like finding these myths here and there and piecing it together in a bit. I'm sure there's a lot more to go into, but I actually want to stop looking at the kind of strange pseudoscience and UFO religion stuff that's associated with alien abduction and UAP crash retrievals. I'm going to, operationalize a mission to transmute those myths into something potent for our society. But I'm actually going to start looking into my own dream contacts more. This has led to a greater conviction that something really is happening, that non-human intelligence contact does happen, and it does happen for me primarily through dreams. Those contacts are real, those are meaningful, and can be of benefit to our society. And so I'm going to dignify them by dignifying my study of them and really elevating that mission to, kind of embody this sense of dream shamanism, which does really truly involve mirroring and reflecting the truth that dream shamanism is universally available to everyone. You don't have to go to the top levels. You just have to start working with your own mind, body, heart, soul. You don't have to work with interlocutors, although that's helpful sometimes. You can just start here and now by breathing, saying yes to dreams. Take a moment to do that. Take a moment to feel a sense of forgiveness in your heart for whatever cult-like disinformation has traumatized you. I could connect these dots because I was called to forgive those men, the alien abduction research cohort from 1992 by Enochian Angels I communicated with through the rituals of John Dee. They called me to forgive them. I did so in my heart, and I can connect these dots. You can too, in whatever way is meaningful to you. May you be well.